I welcome you back to my podcast series titled Prison Abolition as a Spiritual Practice, Abolishing the Invisible Bars to Achieve Inner Freedom. And once again, my name is Andre Pierce for those who are just joining. So in the last episode, I given you a brief introduction into a critical spiritual law called the power of silence. And I elaborated on how, when we turn away from the world and turn within, we become in tune with the higher frequency. We begin to awaken the voice of the spirit, sort of raise it. And the voice of the spirit, as I elaborated on, is a guiding, protective, and caring voice. I elaborated on how, when we establish a regular practice of sitting still and meditating in silence, we begin to gradually look at life through wiser eyes. Hear more attentively and patiently with caring ears, and speak more softly with a humble tongue. Well, given that the power of silence, the power of stillness is such a critical spiritual law, one that can be practiced in many ways, and each practice rewarding you a different spiritual gift, I felt it necessary to go a bit deeper, elaborate a bit further on this spiritual law and its various spiritual practices. So in this episode, I titled it Being Still to Run Deep. What do I mean by that? Being still to run deep. Let's talk about it. When we learn to sit still and meditate in silence, we begin to recharge, refill, replenish. We be still to run deep. Now, this spiritual law is actually something that can be observed in nature, because nature teaches us that still waters run deep. And we usually use that term as a manner of speaking to refer to someone who's a quiet reflector. That person that, they're few in words, but when they do speak, they tend to express deep, beautiful thoughts, right? But not only does still waters run deep, not only is it a manner of speaking, but nature teaches us that it is literal, because those pools of water that tend to be still and calm, and they're not flashing about, in tidal waves, or they're not, flowing wildly and violent currents. Those still waters tend to have deep bottoms. Still waters run deep. A law of nature, and as well as spiritual law. But let's talk about the spiritual law of still waters run deep. When we sit still in silence and make this a regular practice, we begin to recharge our spirit. We become abundant with that electrical light force that makes us glow, right? That unlocks our creativity. So there are various ways to practice this spiritual law of being still in order to run deep. So in this episode, what I would like to do is share with you my personal spiritual practices, or my way of practicing this spiritual law of still waters running deep. And I also like to share with you the particular benefits I get from each practice. Now, over the course of decades, I've actually practiced maybe more than a dozen of these spiritual practices of stillness. But there are 5 that really rewards me with, there's so many benefits. So I'm going to share with you these 5 practices. One is called mantra stillness, which can be practiced in 2 different ways, where you recite an inspirational word or short phrase in your mind, and you make that phrase or that one word your meditation focus. That's one way to practice stillness or mantra meditation. Another way is through chanting, where you recite a single word or inspirational phrase under your breath quietly, right? Now, there are two other forms of meditations that I practice called deep breathing or power breathing. So, in one of those deep breathing exercises, you may have practiced it yourself, but it consists of just inhaling deeply in your nostrils and exhaling slowly from your mouth. But what I've learned to do is I reverse that form of breathing, and I instead breathe in through my mouth and exhale through my nostrils. I'm going to elaborate a little further on these different practices. I'm just giving you a brief, overlay of what I'm going to be getting into. So the fifth one I'm going to share with you is empty mind meditation. So let's go deep. Let's talk about this. So with mantra meditation, where I recite a word or inspirational phrase in my mind, when I practice that, the benefits of that is it boosts my self-confidence. It really improves my sense of well-being. Even more than that, it helps me, right, to deal with a slight speech defect. Where as a child, I, tended to speak, slightly rapidly with a slight stutter. But by practicing this mental mantra, it helps me to manage that slight speech defect. And again, it boosts my confidence and it gives me tremendous well-being. Also, I practice a form of mantra where I chant quietly under my breath. And when I practice chanting meditation, the spiritual gifts that it rewards me here is it gives me compassion, empathy, sensitivity. In many ways it sort of softens and sensitizes me, in a spiritual, good way. Now, when I do practice chanting under my breath, I just feel like more empathetic. And I can relate to people better. I'm more sensitive to their emotions, and I'm more, cautious about not offending them. Where in the past, I was a bit reckless, didn't care about offending you. Like it just was, it didn't register. But again, through chanting, now when I offend you, it registers. It bothers me. I feel a need to apologize. Now, the third form of meditation that I practice on a daily basis is deep breathing. And again, I inhale deeply through my nostrils and exhale slowly from my mouth. This was actually the first form of meditation that I practiced decades ago when I was seeking healing after spending a year in solitary confinement. And with this form of meditation, the spiritual gifts, it gives me tremendous calm and it's instant. It's not over a course of months of, consistently practicing this meditation. I practice it one night or one day and I feel great for the rest of that day. So it's instant. So now another form of deep breathing that I practice is a bit untraditional, and I really never heard of anyone practicing this form of meditation. But what I do is I reverse my breathing. I don't inhale through my nostrils, I inhale through my mouth. Sort of like sucking on a straw, like pulling air through a straw, sort of. And what I learned is that if I do that, I'll take in tremendous more oxygen than I'm releasing. So all that extra oxygen, I'm assuming, gets preserved or reserved in my muscle tissue, in my blood cells, in my lungs, in my brain cells. And the first time I practiced this form of power breathing, and I admit I was incarcerated, and this was decades ago, but the first time I practiced it, that night, I slept for only 2 hours, and that was all I needed. I felt recharged. I felt great, energized, and I knew that I discovered something powerful. And then I noticed that one day, after practicing my power breathing, and at that time it was like an hour and 40 minutes, each session, like that was my thing back then, hour and 40 to reap the most optimal benefits. So one day I was working out after performing this power breathing, and someone said to me, "Wow, you're not taking breaks." And it dawned on me that as I was working out strenuously, I didn't need pause. And I noticed also that when I perform power breathing, I'm able, I guess my muscles like repair overnight. So the repair process is like, it's instantly. So I'm able to work out for like 4 or 5 days straight, again, up to 3 hours a day, strenuously. And I know that sounds hard to believe. Some might say, come on, that's just unrealistic. But one of these days, and I kind of say this tongue in cheek, but one of these days I will record one of my 3-hour workouts, because I know that it's mind-boggling. But I believe that, again, through power breathing, I'm taking in so much oxygen that's not getting expelled and it's getting preserved in my muscle tissue, and it's giving me a superhuman strength. So now the last meditation practice I want to talk about is called empty mind meditation. And with this meditation, the spiritual rewards that it gives me is a deep sense of compassion, great serenity. It improves my focus, my concentration, where I can maintain a steady focus for hours and hours without losing my train of thought. But also, when I practice empty mind meditation, it makes my dreams vivid and prophetic. Let me talk about that. So, before I got into the mind meditation, I would say that I don't dream, because when I would go to sleep and wake up, I never recall my dreams. But once I began practicing empty mind meditation, now when I go to sleep, my dreams are like movies. They're cinematic, and they're very detailed and vivid, right? But even more than that, they tend to be a little prophetic. And I know that's gonna sound kind of spooky, but let me give you 2 examples. So one time just after a night of practicing empty mind meditation, again, I was incarcerated. I'm not ashamed to admit that. So the next day, in that dream, I had dreamt about a woman in a very bright red, almost a blinding, bright red dress, right? Wake up in the morning, turn my TV on. First thing I see, a woman in a very bright, blinding red dress. Prophetic. But prophetic, and then, was, mundane, ordinary, nothing, special about it. But in the second example, where my dream proved prophetic, it's a bit unsettling. So I want to brace you for what I'm about to talk about, because it's kind of violent. So around this had to be sometime maybe in 2001, and at that time I was probably maybe 6 years into a 30-year sentence. I was still fresh, as we would say at the time. So I started practicing empty mind meditation for about several months, and at the time I kept having this recurring dream about one of my siblings, right, going through a violent assault by her spouse. So obviously this dream was unsettling to me. But what really scared me is that I knew at that time that my empty mind meditation was probably telling me that this dream might be prophetic. Because again, I was having those prophetic dreams when I practiced empty mind meditation. So I kept having this dream over and over, the same dream, but it kept evolving. So in the dream, I would think to myself, I would look around at my dream, and I would hear about my sibling going through this violent attack, and I would be saying in my dream, I dreamt this, and I know it will come true. But then I would say to myself in my dream, but is it a dream though? And will I wake up and just be unsettled by it, but a dream nonetheless? So this is how real and intense this dream was. So again, the dream was recurring, same dream kept evolving. So one day, I called my grandmother, right? And without warning, without bracing me, she said, Andre, now I don't want to give the person's name. I want to protect their confidentiality. But she said, Andre, so and so, was assaulted by her spouse. Or he tried to throw acid on her face, like try to blind her. And I'm in prison now. I'm on the phone. I'm feeling helpless. I can't protect my sibling. So I said, Grandma, may she rest in peace. I said, Grandma, I dreamt about that. I knew that this would happen. Right? I knew it would come true. And I knew that it would be by her spouse. So now I'm bothered, I'm unsettled, I'm going through it. Right? So luckily my sibling was okay. If not for wearing glasses, she would be probably blind right now. So that's a blessing in that sense. But I'm just giving, and I don't want to turn anyone away from practicing, my meditation. I'm just giving you some examples on how when I practice it, it enhances my dreams and make them prophetic. So, but overall, when I practice empty mind meditation, my dreams are prophetic in a very mundane way. I'll dream about, like a green apple, wake up in the morning, open the fridge and see a green apple. So it tend to be like very mundane. But at some point I would like to kind of experiment further with empty mind and see how far I can go with these prophecies. So I just given you 5 different ways that I practice stillness, which is a powerful spiritual law. I talked about the spiritual rewards that each practice, gives me. So to kind of recap, these various forms of meditations and boost my confidence, and improves my well-being, my sense of self. They give me a sense of feeling connected to something greater than myself. They fill me with compassion and empathy. They give me mental clarity, tremendous calm. And also they give me that superhuman strength where, again, I could work out for 2 or 3 hours with no problem without taking a pause. So in the next episode, I want to talk about another form of meditation that I practice that I haven't heard of anyone else, performing this particular kind of meditation. But I want to talk about how with this form of meditation, which I even kind of coined the term meditarizing, because it uses memorized passages as a focal point for your meditation. And I will get into how when I practice that form of meditation, how it just gives me tremendous insight and wisdom. I could sit down and write and express beautiful thoughts. It helped my GPA when I was in college while incarcerated. So I'll get into depth with that, with meditarizing next episode. So I thank you all for joining me. You can find me on my YouTube channel at Andre Pierre 723, or find my podcast on Spotify titled Prison Abolition as a Spiritual Practice. Thanks for joining me. Peace and blessings.